Hello everyone, this is PKL Entertainment and we are back again, and we're going to focus on boxing now and what is clearly the super fight of the year, when Deontay Wilder, WBC World Heavyweight Champion, takes on Tyson Fury in a rematch following their first encounter, which took place back last December, I believe. And as I mentioned before, this really is not only the first super fight of the year, but I think is the biggest fight of the year. If you look at what other fights we're going to get, Joshua's going to fight Pulev later. It's been recently announced that Dylan White's going to fight Alexander Povetkin. I'm sure Usyk will fight Chisora at some point. So no other fight really can compare to this in terms of its significance and the fact that it's a heavyweight between two very established champions and fighters and who have distinctive personalities. So this is really, if you're asking me, this is really the super fight of the year. So just to quickly recap over what happened in the first fight, as I'm sure we all know, everybody's watched this knows. The first fight, which for me started off very cagey. There were a lot of rounds that could have gone back and forth. I think Fury surprised a lot of us how well he moved, how well he performed, considering how sort of flabby and weighty he looked. He was using his jab very well, moving around the ring side to side, making it very difficult for Wilder, who was clearly looking to try and get the knockout as soon as possible. You know, he's headhunting, swinging wildly, missing. But at the same time, Fury was doing a lot of sticking hands behind his back, sticking his tongue out. So for the first 4 or 5 rounds, they were very sort of nip and tuck. In my personal opinion, I know a lot of people are going to feel differently, but the first 4 or 5 rounds were very sort of, not a lot really was happening. There wasn't a sort of intense, significant action, and the rounds could have gone either way. So we kept continuing that run of form. And then we get to the 9th round, Fury gets knocked down. It's more of a flash knockdown. It's one of those where Fury's kind of trying to move and sort of duck, and then Wilder kind of catches him. I think he catches him with a right, and then the left sort of knocks him down when he's on his way down at the moment. So he gets back up, survives that. We move on to the 12th. Many people in the crowd and many of the commentators are feeling this is Fury's fight now. He's just got to survive this last round. And then Wilder famously now knocks him down in the 12th. As we all know what happened next, Fury hits the deck, like back on the canvas, doesn't get up for eternity, 4, 5, 6 seconds, and then kind of rises up at the last second, beats the count, and then comes back. Really strong showing, strong comeback in that last sort of round. Bell rings. Everybody thinks Fury's won it. Everybody thinks Fury schooled him, and then we get the controversial draw. So that was the run of events there. Me personally, I had it to Wilder by a point because of the knockdowns. Now, just quickly, when you have a fight that's close, when there's not really a lot you can pick between the rounds, when there's not really a lot of significant punches or significant combinations, you've got to give it to the fighter who's scoring the more meaningful, powerful punches, right? Who's made the most impact with his work throughout the rounds, okay? This is why I gave the first Kovalev and Ward fight to Kovalev. That was another very tight, lots of holding, grappling, but Kovalev scored the knockdown, and it was evenly matched throughout. So you've got to give the person who gives the knockdown. That's how I see it. Now, a lot of people viewed it differently. They said Fury was scored in Wilder. It was a boxing clinic. And what we have to remember is how much the subplot of Tyson Fury's comeback really drove through this first fight, and how much it altered the perception of many people watching this fight, right? Because Fury was clearly the underdog, okay? He fought Seferi, he fought Pianetta. Those were just nothing fights, not even worth mentioning. We had the whole backstory of him coming back from supposed alcoholism, drug addiction, suicide. We all know the backstory there. So this was like the comeback, right? This was the big sort of underdog coming up against the sort of knockout king in Deontay Wilder. Everybody, me included, I expected Wilder to knock Fury out within 5 to 6 rounds. Wilder doesn't normally knock someone out in the first round unless they come forward at him. We saw that with Brazil. But generally, he waits to bide his time before getting knockout. So I thought Fury would have an initial success before Wilder would take him out. So when you watch that fight, every time Fury lasts a bit longer, he lasts another round. Wilder is swinging and wildly missing all over the place. Looks uncoordinated, looks unorthodox. Typical Wilder. So every round you get like that, it makes people automatically think Fury is outperforming him, Fury's outmaneuvering him, right? Where you have to look at it more closely and how many punches, effective punches, did Fury really land throughout each round. That's what you've got to look at. And I think a lot of people mistook the fact that Fury was just surviving each round. You saw it after each round. Not a lot of punches were thrown, but Fury's back to his corner, hands aloft in the air after each round, as if he, has survived each round, and that had gained him another round or another advantage in the fight. So there's two ways you can look at it. If you want to focus on the fact that maybe the better boxing work was coming from Fury, and the fact that Wilder was swinging and missing a lot, that made you think that Fury was scoring him, fine. A lot other people will look at the fact that in the 12th round, when Fury gets knocked down, you cannot deny that a lot of referees would have waved that off as soon as Fury hits the deck. We saw that with Canelo and Khan, and especially with the Ryan Garcia fight recently. When the fighter hits the deck like that, the referee is always going to try and sort of wave it off straight away to then get the paramedics in because they want to prioritise the fighter's safety. And Fury looked cleaned out. He looked cleaned out on the floor, and many refs would have waved it off after about 2-3 seconds. So you could look at it that way and say Fury was actually lucky to still be able to get given the time to get up and then finish off the fight. So there's different perspectives you can look at it at. But I think it was in general a fight that Wilder really underestimated Fury. I think the first match by design was so that Wilder could take Fury now while he wasn't 100%, and that he could get a big name on his resume, because at the time Wilder was still getting that criticism from a lot of fans that despite the long record that he had, undefeated as champion, he didn't have necessarily big names on his resume to compare to what AJ had, Joshua had, right? That's why I felt they picked Fury that time. So that's sort of the context of the first fight, in my personal opinion. I know many people feel differently, but that's really the summary of what we felt in the first fight. Now we come on to the second fight. Now the dynamics have changed a bit now. So if we look at what each fighter has to do to win, now we'll start off with Fury. Now the first fight, Fury fought his typical style, lots of jabs, flicking, head movement, moving around the ring, typical sort of sticking the tongue out, hands behind the back, really getting into his opponent psychologically, staying at range, holding and grabbing him when he needs to. Okay, so that's his style. You go back and watch majority of his fights, even the fights when he fought against, let's say, Chisora and stopped him, those were not massive knockout power performances. He beat Chisora really through more accumulation of punches rather than actual imposing powerful shots. So if Fury wants to win this fight, he essentially has to maintain the style that he's developed throughout his career. He's got to stay out of range. He's got to use his jab. He's got to try and frustrate Wilder. Every time Wilder comes forward, he's got to sort of grab on, hold on, just try and limit any sort of potential momentum that Wilder can get into this fight. Now, what Fury has to cut out, in my opinion, is the whole sticking out your tongue and the whole hands tied behind your back. Now, the casual viewer is going to think that's great, and that's a sign of how you can see Fury is clearly outmaneuvering, right? But when you are the away fighter, okay, you've got to take it from the champion right? You've got to prove to the judges that you were the one that is taking the initiative. You were the one that is going forward. You were the one that is being the aggressor, and you were the one that is clearly taking the fight away from the champion, right? So a lot of the time, Fury doing all these antics is not going to convince the judges, right? So when you get a close round, that could be nick and tuck and could maybe be decided by a flurry of punches in the last 30 seconds, right? By not doing anything and doing all these antics, you're potentially giving rounds away and giving any potential advantage that you've gained in the first half of the round. So Fury's got to actually stop those antics and actually throw more combinations, if you like, from a distance. You know, jab 1-2 and move, jab 1-2 and move. You know, really look to put more volume in your punches, not necessarily more power, because power is not Fury's best attribute. You know, we see a lot of the times his punches are kind of cuffing punches, if you like. They don't really carry any force or weight. And like I said, he doesn't really take opponents out if you look throughout the fights in his career. That's not Fury's way. So there was all this talk about how he's purposely put on weight to try and add more power, but I don't believe that for 1 second. I don't think for 1 second that Fury is going in there to try and score any sort of knockout punch. I don't think he has the ability to stop Wilder through an accumulation, because Wilder, he's not just Aura who will gas out and be very stationary. Wilder, look how lean he is, look how sort of well conditioned he is, and him himself, he has that sort of long, sort of more leaner, sort of athletic physique that's not easy to sort of pin down into a corner, right? So if you do get in a corner situation, Fury really has to maximize more his hand speed and invest more combination work. And he's going to have to fight well for 12 rounds, because he's not going to knock out Wilder, and he's not going to stop Wilder. So it's going to have to be again a near flawless performance, of which of course he's going to have to avoid getting knocked out. Okay, so that's Fury's game plan. Now we go into Wilder's game plan. Now, as I said before, I think in the first fight, Wilder didn't prepare for Fury properly. I don't think he took him seriously in the first fight, and you could clearly see that by the way he was, you know, the fact he was going for the knockout, he was just headhunting, and it looked awful to watch at times. But that's Wilder. We can go through all these other fights. You know, it's been noted so many times against Spilka, he was losing. Actually, Spilka was actually doing a lot of what I think Fury should do in this fight. Spilka was actually taking it to Wilder and throwing those combinations and trying to corner Wilder as well, and really taking it to Wilder before getting stopped. So Spilka actually had the right game plan. And then we also know Ortiz as well. The first fight, clearly winning, was just more consummate in his work, was more solid in his work, and had that 7th round. I think it was the 7th when he had Wilder in so much trouble. I believe if that round had gone on for another minute or two, it might have potentially got stopped. That's the sort of, if you go through and watch that fight again, particularly that 7th round, I believe, and he's really got Ortiz has really got Wilder against the ropes. Those are the sort of scenarios that Fury has got to get into. Okay, so instead of keeping his distance, which he has to, but there are moments when he's going to have to try and close the gap and really impose himself more, just like Ortiz did in the first fight. You know, and Wilder is always going to be eventually very aggressive, but will concede rounds because that's his style. So I think this second fight, he's going to take Fury a lot more seriously, and he's going to have a much more considered approach. So don't go in there thinking that Wilder's going to go and try and knock Fury out in the first round. I don't believe that. I think they would have taken into consideration the fact that the first fight, he was perceived to be very wild and all over the place, and that, as I said, affected a lot of people's perception of where the fight potentially was going. So I think this time he's going to be a lot more considered. He's going to be a lot more cagey with his attacks. He's going to keep just moving forward, and he's going to keep kind of pouring that jab, but he's not going to be throwing the right hand as much as he was in the beginning of the few rounds. No way will he be doing that. He's going to basically look to replicate his performance against Ortiz in his second fight, where again he was losing the majority of the rounds. I know people said he lost every round. I think I might have given him one round and he was losing the rest. But in that second fight, you can see he was biding his time more and still moving forward with the jab, but being a lot more considerate in his approach. He was just waiting and waiting and waiting until he got the eventual right hand, and then he landed that, and then that's what he finished off Ortiz with. So that's the approach I think Wilder's going to take in the second fight. Now, for me, I think Wilder should actually do what he didn't do in the first fight and actually focus more on the body. You know, I think a lot of fans, we underestimate how important body work is boxing. You know, it's the punches that really can sap all the stamina and endurance out of your opponent. And yes, Fury has had more fights. He's had more time in the gym, training, getting in better fitness and shape. But, you know, he still is quite a big unit, right? So he's very easy to still get hit in the body. You know, we always marvel at Fury's side to side lateral movement, right? But the head moves side to side, but the body, the sort of core of your physique, doesn't move side to side like your head does, right? That's why it's better to go to the body and then you build up from the body and then work your way up, right? So what Wilder should do is actually throw 2-3 punches to the body, sort of jab to the body, and then sort of 1-2 to the body, 1-2, right in the sort of midsection of Fury. Anytime he can sort of get him to the ropes, get him into the corners, he's got those long arms, that long reach, so he can easily throw a 1-2 combination and then duck out of the way, right? That will sort of test Fury's endurance, test Fury's stamina, and that's a way of keeping him pinned instead of having him walking around everywhere doing all these, you know, lateral movement and lateral switches. By pinning him down to the body, you know, it's making it harder for him to sort of move out the way and evade your punches. So that's what I think Wilder's got to do. And what that will do as well, it will give Wilder much more coordination and much more structure in his attacks. We all saw it when he knocked him down in the 9th round, right? He went to finish him off and he was all over the place. He's like lounging, lunging, and like literally you think sometimes he's going to lunge over the rope in the corner because he's so wild. And then that's what gave Fury time to recover and then counter him with punches, right? So by going to the body, you know, it allows Wilder to be in a much more steadier position. So instead of throwing these wild hooks and leaning forward and then leaving yourself all over the place, susceptible to punches, right? By throwing to the body, 1-2 jab, you're still in a steady position, right? You're still in a much more of a solid foundation, and you're not lunging yourself, and you're not leaving yourself looking all messy and unorthodox all over the ring. So just jab, keep jabbing to the body, and 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, okay? And that will impress the judges more. And you think about what I said before about perceptions of the fight. We normally perceive Fury as the skilled fighter, better technique, better footwork, quicker, and then we perceive Wilder as more the brawler, the puncher, the knockout artist. He lacks the skills, he lacks the boxing IQ, etc., etc. You know, this is the perception, right? But what happens all of a sudden if we see Wilder throwing combinations and actually setting up his punches and actually working his position through, right? Then the perception will change again and people start thinking, well, hang on a minute, there's something different here. Wilder's actually trying to box more, right? Maybe he is getting the upper hand more because he wasn't boxing previously and now he's boxing more. So maybe he's getting more the initiative of the fight. You see, so Wilder's really got to still be on the front foot, still be on aggressive, because I think the way to really beat Fury, if you can't knock him out, is to throw more volume, apply more frequency of punches. I will still maintain, no one's going to agree with me, but I will still maintain that if Klitschko had actually thrown punches, because throwing punches does help in boxing, but had he actually thrown a high volume of punches, not necessarily causing big damage to Fury, but causing a high volume of punches, I actually think he would have, you know, got the decision in that fight. Because if you go back in that fight and just look at how many punches Klitschko throws, which is barely non-existent, okay? So Wilder cannot stick to the strategy. If you call it strategy, again, I don't agree with this, where you sort of waiting to catch his moment and get that right hand, right? That is not a strategy, because what if the other guy gets up, right? What are you going to do then? If your whole plan is to just get that knockout punch, and fair enough, he's got the record, of course, he's got the form of knocking everybody out, but you're going to have one match where the knockout doesn't come, or the guy gets back up. So if you're getting outpointed for 6 rounds, you score the knockout in the 7th, the guy gets back up, gets to the bell, goes back to his corner, recovers himself, and then replicates the first 5 rounds again where he's outpointing you, then what, your knockout meaningless, right? Your knockout is meaningless. Like I said, the 2 knockdowns is the reason I gave Wilder the first fight. So he's got to be more aggressive, yes, more proactive, yes, but more considered in his approach, and attack the body more, okay? And that will then, like I said, have him be aggressive, but keep him in a much more sturdier and stable position, and won't have him flinging and wilding all over the place. So that's what I think Wilder has to do. Now, can he do that? Now, the problem you have is that when you're used to just knocking everyone out, and you're used to just being able to hold back, wait your moment, wait your time, bide your time, and eventually get the knockout. When you've done that near enough 40 times at least, it's very hard to shift out of that mindset, shift out of that game plan, because you're always thinking mentally, well, the knockout's going to come, and yet people have rightly criticised that Wilder lacks dimensions, he lacks those different depths to his kind of boxing, sort of structure, if you like. Yes, he does lack those, but it's not impossible, and this is where his trainers can earn their pennies, really, because he's lean, he's tall, he's athletic, so he's got the attributes to adopt that sort of more combination at far range. He's got the attributes to do that. It's just whether mindset, have they really implanted that into him, that is the way to go, because he just cannot go and think to himself, I'm just going to go in there and try and knock this guy out again, because Fury's going to do what Fury does, and at 6'9" or 6'10", whatever he is, and having the quickness and the lateral movement that he's got, Fury is a difficult obstacle. He is someone who is very difficult to pin down and very difficult to sort of land consistent punches with. Okay, so that's what I think Wilder and Fury need to do the fight. Now, how's the fight going to go? I think the first couple of rounds are going to be very cagey. They're going to be very slow. I think Fury is going to, again, try and lull Wilder out. He's going to be doing all his usual antics. We know what he does by now. But I do think Wilder will be more hesitant. Even though I don't think he should do this, he is going to be more hesitant. And he's just going to bide his time, move his approach, and then I think we won't really see any intensity till maybe the 4th or 5th rounds. And I think over time, as the fight goes on, I think Fury will just stick to his game plan. He won't do anything more. Wilder will eventually put the pedal on. He'll come forward more. He'll start then trying to go for the knockout more. And I think he's going to score a knockout in the 10th round. That's what I think. Because he won't be flinging and swinging as much in the earlier rounds, that's what tied him in the first fight, and that's why I think when he knocked Fury down, he couldn't really finish him off, because he expended so much energy in the other rounds trying to go for the knockout. So he gets the knockout, he goes for a few swings, he misses, Fury backs away, leans off him, Wilder is tired, and therefore Fury's able to then come back at him again. This time I think Wilder is going to be more considered in his approach, so when he does score the knockdown, I think he's going to have more in the tank to then go and then finish Fury off. And I think, as I mentioned before, that's when your combinations clearly come into play. You know, a lot of the time you can stop fighters more through accumulation of punches, right? If you're pounding them away in the corner, 3, 4, 5 punches combinations, you're more likely to get a stoppage, okay, than just throwing a single shot all the time. So that's what I think. I think a Wilder is a 10th round stoppage. A 10th round knockout, sorry. Fury can win, but again, he's going to have to fight 12 flawless rounds. He's going to have to get it on the points. I don't think he's got enough to knock Wilder out, to stop him, though, because again, I don't think he is someone who throws 3, 4, 5 punch combinations. I just don't see it. Now, unless he just, you know, as Joshua described Ruiz's punch, he throws a gift from the gods and he lands square one, flat on the face of Wilder, and he just completely scrambles him. Then he can come in, move, and throw his combinations, and he might be able to square the stoppage that way. We do have to consider that the cut that he suffered against Otto Wallin may be back in the back of Fury's mind, because I don't believe he's been cut like that before. Not for a long time in his career. I know he hasn't been prolific. It's not as if he's been fighting 3 or 4 times a year, but he hasn't experienced a cut like that before, right? And that is going to be on the back of his mind, because if Otto Wallin, whatever his name is, can cause a cut like that, then what do you think Wilder can do? And you have to remember, the 2 knockdowns, they weren't flush on punches, right? Certainly not in the case of the flush ones landed on Ortiz, and definitely not in the case of the flush ones landed on Brazil. No way. So that's how I think it's going to go. So Fury, if he is going to win, he's going to have to win on points, but I don't think he will. I think Wilder is just going to be on his game a lot more. He's going to be less reckless, which means he's going to have more energy in the tank. So when he does score at least a knockdown, he's going to be able to then have enough fire to then go back and finish it off. I'm not expecting an absolute classic. I think it's going to be very cagey, especially from the first 4 or 5 rounds. As a viewer, you might get a bit frustrated that not a lot's happening. The rematches, they always tend to be a lot more tense. Both fighters, they would have gone through what happened in the first fight. You know, if you have a very sort of highly active or very controversial first fight, the fighters have a much more considered approach in the second fight. So I don't think it's going to be an all-out war. It's not going to be an all-out classic either, but it's going to be thrilling, because the whole time, as you do with Wilder, you're always going to thinking, when's that right hand going to come? Is Fury going to be able to outlast the full 12 rounds? Is Wilder going to fall for any Fury antics? When the knockdown does come, is Fury going to get up like he will last time? And another interesting element is, what is the referee going to do this time? Because in the build up to this fight, there's been a lot of criticism how the referee kind of supposedly gave Fury an extended count, and as I said before, the way Fury landed, a lot of referees would have waved that fight off. Okay, so it'll be very interesting to see what does happen if Fury gets knocked down. What would a ref do? What if, as unlikely as it is, what if Wilder gets knocked down? Will the referee, you know, wave it off, or would he allow Wilder the time that he allowed Fury? So there's so many interesting dynamics going on here. Just to quickly point out, the first fight I thought did great numbers. It did 325,000 pay-per-views. I think this one will be more successful, even though the hype hasn't been as such. It's been a bit more of a muted hype, I think, because what more can you say? You know, they did all the sort of crazy press conferences in the first fight, right? So there's not really a lot more to say, and we all know what happened in the first fight. Every man knows what they have to do, and we know especially all these grudges are really manufactured. You know, we had this with Wilder and Fury. You know, after each press conference, there would be sat together behind the scenes. We'd see photos on Twitter of them sitting together, laughing and joking. So they probably felt, let's not do all this hype nonsense again. Maybe Wilder, I think especially, didn't want to get into all the sort of mind game stuff. He probably felt that might have affected his preparation on the first time round. So yeah, it's been a bit more of a muted sort of build up. There was no press tour. People commenting that a lot of the time. They've been making appearances on basketball games, I believe, in America. There's been no big sort of interviews, if you like, in the UK, surprisingly. So I believe this pay-per-view is it £24? I think it's the same price as Joshua and Ruiz 2. I do believe it's a pay-per-view, even though, as I've stated in previous videos, I hate the idea of pay-per-view. This is a pay-per-view fight, okay? Every sense of the word, ticks all the boxes if you want to describe what sets up a pay-per-view. And I believe whoever wins is going to be regarded as the number one heavyweight. I know Anthony Joshua, I know he regained his belts. Yes, we have to credit him for that. Yes, but I think for a long time now, a lot of people have had the perception that really Wilder and Fury are above Joshua, and even Sky Sports, a lot of the commentators and pundits on Sky Sports have said that, as well as fans alike. I just think the Ruiz loss just exposed Joshua. The fact, it was such a high pressure event. He fought away from home, and the way he lost, and not only that, the way he fought the second time, that was a very safety first tactical win, which nothing wrong with that. You know, boxing is a very multi-layered sport. There are different ways to win. It's not just high action brawling, knockouts, and last minute fight to the deaths and all this. There is more to that. The science and all this. I understand that, but I just think the way Joshua fought the second fight, it just emphasizes people's belief that Wilder and Fury really are the two top heavyweights, and I think the winner of this fight, even though he'll have one belt opposed to Joshua's 3 belts, I think we will regard as the number one heavyweight in the world, because they will still be unbeaten and they will have kind of the record more. I mean, for Wilder as well, I mean, if he can beat Fury, it really will deflate all the previous criticisms, because he would have got in the ring with Ortiz twice and he would have got in the ring with Fury twice. So as well as sort of Brazil, he now has a substantial resume. I mean, we can still pick holes in it, but you can no longer say he's fought all these bums, and that will give him 43, and not long now, or not too long away from the unbeaten record, the 50-0 unbeaten record of there. So for Fury, if he wins, I think it will give us probably more chance of getting the Joshua fight. And I mean, I say undisputed, but the problem you have, of course, is that I think Joshua is going to eventually vacate one of his belts, more than likely the WBO belt. The Pulev is a mandatory for the WBA, and he'll have other mandatories coming up very soon. So even if Fury wins this, and the logical fight would be then to have Joshua and Fury, provided Joshua gets past Pulev, I think that Joshua will drop the belt for the WBO, which Usyk will probably pick up. But Joshua and Fury would still be a massive fight. Don't get me wrong, that would be a huge fight. That would just smash the UK pay-per-views straight away. But if Wilder wins, I don't know if we're going to get this Joshua fight ever. I just think, the politics between the two promotional companies, the previous antagonism between the two, I was very pro Joshua to begin with, but I don't think they just want him in with Wilder, especially if Wilder knocks out Fury again. I just think if he devastates Fury with an early knockout as well, let's say he does like he did against Brazil, I just think you can forget that Joshua Wilder fight. I think they'll just keep AJ away from Wilder at all costs, and it will just inflame the negotiations even more now, because the previous criticism was that Wilder doesn't fight on pay-per-view and he hasn't got the resume. But if he smashes Fury again, he would have this will be his third no, it won't be his third consecutive pay-per-view, because Brazil, or was Brazil pay-per-view? No, Brazil wasn't pay-per-view, no. But that'll be the last 3 out of his 4 fights pay-per-view in America, which we know is harder to do because it's more expensive prices, right? So again, that will just inflame the negotiations even more, and I don't think we would ever get that fight. But yeah, it is a really thrilling spectacle to look forward to. It's very exciting. Again, the best fight of the year in terms of an occasion, in terms of the hype, and I just feel that Deontay Wilder is going to be more on his game. He's going to apply himself a lot more better, concentrate a lot more, and once he gets that knockout, I think he will go in for the kill and be able to finish Fury off. But it will be late, and it will be interesting to see what happens to Fury after that. So I think he might retire if he gets knocked out, but we will wait and see. But those are my overall thoughts on, again, the biggest fight of the year. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Fury will just do the same and it'll be even more of a schooling, if you like, or a dominating win if you felt the first one was as in the second time? Do you think, like me, that Wilder's going to be much more on the ball and he's not going to be winging away, expending energy, and when he does get the eventual meaningful punch, he's going to be able to punish Fury a lot more? Do you think it will last 12 rounds? Do you think Wilder will get an early knockout and, you know, like Brazil, and maybe knock Fury out in the first or second? Do you think, even more speculative, that Fury will somehow knock Wilder out or stop him? I can't see that, but we never know. So you let me know what you think in the comments below, and also what do you think the eventual winner and loser, what will be the sort of future plans going forward for them. I will comment more on the recent announcement of the White Povetkin fight, or the pending announcement of the White Povetkin fight as well. I will do that in a separate video. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks very much for listening. There will be more coverage and boxing videos coming your way. But for now, take care and we will see you soon.